In 1911, an American explorer stumbled upon stone terraces high in the Peruvian Andes, Machu Picchu, a complete city abandoned in the clouds. No one knew it existed. The Inca who built it left no written records of why. It simply waited, hidden, for centuries. But Machu Picchu is just one of countless civilizations that rose to greatness and then disappeared, leaving only ruins and questions. I'm Detective Vera Nash, and today we're investigating 10 civilizations that vanished without a trace. Some collapsed suddenly, others faded slowly into myth. All of them left mysteries that archaeologists still struggle to solve. What happened to these people? Where did they go? And why did they abandon cities that took generations to build? Welcome to the Case Files. Let's investigate the civilizations that time forgot. The Maya collapse. At its peak around 800 AD, Maya civilization was one of the most advanced in the world. They built massive stone cities in the jungles of Central America. They developed sophisticated mathematics, including the concept of zero. They created accurate astronomical calendars that tracked planetary movements. They had a complex writing system with thousands of glyphs. Cities like Tikal housed tens of thousands of people. Temples rose hundreds of feet above the jungle canopy. The Maya traded across vast distances, from central Mexico to Honduras. This was a thriving, sophisticated civilization. Then, between 800 and 900 AD, it collapsed. Within a century, the great cities were abandoned. The population declined by 90% or more. People simply walked away from cities their ancestors had built over hundreds of years. By the time Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 1500s, the great Maya cities were ruins overgrown by jungle. What happened? We still don't know for certain. The leading theory is a combination of prolonged drought, environmental degradation, and warfare. The Maya had cleared too much forest for agriculture. When severe droughts hit, crops failed. Food shortages led to warfare between city-states. The political system collapsed. People abandoned the cities and dispersed into smaller settlements. But here's what's strange. The Maya didn't disappear. Their descendants still live throughout Central America. They speak Maya languages. They maintain cultural traditions. But they completely abandoned their greatest achievements. The cities, the monumental architecture, the complex political structures, all abandoned. It's as if modern civilization suddenly walked away from New York, London, and Tokyo and returned to village life. And the survivors couldn't or wouldn't explain why. The Indus Valley Civilization. Around 2500 BC, one of the world's first great civilizations flourished in what's now Pakistan and northwest India. The Indus Valley Civilization, also called the Harappan Civilization, was contemporary with ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. At its peak, it may have had a population of 5 million people. The cities were remarkably advanced. Mohenjo-daro and Harappa had sophisticated urban planning with grid-patterned streets. They had advanced drainage systems, public baths, and standardized brick sizes. They built multi-story buildings with private wells and bathrooms. The level of urban planning was extraordinary for the Bronze Age. The Indus people developed a writing system that appears on thousands of seals and artifacts. They traded extensively with Mesopotamia. They worked bronze, created jewelry, and produced pottery. This was a civilization as advanced as any other at the time. Then, around 1900 BC, it collapsed. The cities were gradually abandoned. By 1300 BC, the Indus Valley Civilization had completely disappeared. The writing system was forgotten. The urban culture vanished. People returned to village life. Why? The honest answer is we don't know. We can't read their writing, so they left no explanation. Various theories exist. Climate change and drought making the Indus River less reliable for agriculture, tectonic activity changing river courses, Aryan invasions from the north, or epidemic disease. But here's the mystery. There's little evidence of warfare or sudden disaster. The cities weren't burned or destroyed. They were gradually abandoned, as if people slowly decided city life wasn't worth maintaining. The civilization didn't collapse violently. It just faded away. And because we can't read their script, we may never know what the Indus people themselves thought was happening. The Anasazi. In the American Southwest, between 900 and 1300 AD, the ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi, built remarkable cliff dwellings and stone cities. At Chaco Canyon in New Mexico, they constructed massive stone buildings with hundreds of rooms, aligned astronomically. At Mesa Verde in Colorado, they built entire villages into cliff faces. The Anasazi developed sophisticated irrigation systems to farm the arid landscape. They created an extensive trade network stretching from the Pacific coast to the Great Plains. They built straight roads connecting distant settlements. Their pottery and architecture were highly developed. At the civilization's height in the 1100s, Chaco Canyon may have been a ceremonial center, attracting people from across the region. The great houses were architectural marvels, some 4 or 5 stories tall, with precisely cut sandstone blocks. Then, in the late 1200s, they abandoned everything. The cliff dwellings, the great houses of Chaco Canyon, the elaborate irrigation systems, all left behind. The population dispersed. By 1300, the major centers were empty. What happened? The most accepted theory involves a severe drought called the Great Drought that lasted from 1276 to 1299. Tree ring data confirms this was an unusually harsh and prolonged dry period. Without reliable water, the large settlements couldn't be sustained. But drought alone doesn't fully explain it. Why not return when rains came back? Some archaeologists point to evidence of violence and warfare in the final period. Others suggest internal social collapse, perhaps religious or political upheaval. There are even controversial claims of cannibalism at some sites, suggesting desperation or ritual violence. The Anasazi people didn't vanish. Their descendants are the modern Pueblo peoples of New Mexico and Arizona, but they abandoned a level of architectural and social complexity that they never returned to. It's as if something broke in that civilization that couldn't be repaired, even when environmental conditions improved. The Minoans. On the island of Crete in the Mediterranean, around 2000 BC, a sophisticated civilization emerged. The Minoans built elaborate palaces at Knossos, Phaistos, and other sites. These weren't just buildings. They were sprawling complexes with hundreds of rooms, advanced plumbing, colorful frescoes, and sophisticated architecture. Minoan civilization was wealthy and peaceful. Unlike other Bronze Age cultures, their cities had no defensive walls. Their art shows, festivals, religious ceremonies, bull-leaping rituals, and marine life. They developed a writing system called Linear A that we still can't read. They traded throughout the Mediterranean. For over 500 years, Minoan civilization flourished. Then, around 1450 BC, it suddenly collapsed. The palaces were destroyed. The civilization came to an abrupt end. The Mycenaeans from mainland Greece took over Crete. What happened? For years, the leading theory was a massive volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, modern Santorini. The eruption around 1600 BC was one of the largest in human history. The explosion sent tsunamis across the Mediterranean and may have caused climate disruption. But the timeline doesn't quite work. The eruption happened around 1600 BC. The Minoan collapse happened around 1450 BC, 150 years later. The eruption certainly damaged Minoan civilization, but it didn't immediately destroy it. More recent theories suggest the eruption weakened Minoan power, making them vulnerable to invasion by the Mycenaeans. Or perhaps internal political collapse, or a combination of natural disaster, economic disruption, and foreign conquest. The mystery deepens because we can't read Linear A. Whatever the Minoans wrote about their own civilization's decline is lost to us. We're left interpreting ruins without understanding what the people themselves experienced or believed. The Mycenaeans. Speaking of the Mycenaeans, they didn't last much longer than the civilization they conquered. Mycenaean Greece was the civilization of the Trojan war legends, of Agamemnon and the heroes of Homer's epics. From about 1600 to 1100 BC, Mycenaean city-states dominated the Aegean. They built massive fortified citadels with cyclopean walls, stones so large that later Greeks believed only giants could have moved them. Mycenae, Tiryns, and Pylos were centers of power with elaborate palaces. The Mycenaeans developed linear B writing to keep records. They traded across the Mediterranean. They may have been the mysterious sea peoples who raided Egypt. Then, around 1200 BC, Mycenaean civilization collapsed. Within a century, the palaces were destroyed or abandoned. Writing disappeared. Population declined. Greece entered a dark age that lasted 400 years. When Greek civilization re-emerged around 800 BC, the Mycenaean world was legend. What happened? The Bronze Age collapse around 1200 BC affected the entire eastern Mediterranean. The Hittite Empire fell. Egyptian power declined. Cities across the region were destroyed. It was one of history's greatest civilizational catastrophes. Theories for the collapse include invasion by mysterious sea peoples, internal rebellions and warfare, drought and famine, earthquake storms destroying cities, or systemic economic collapse when the interconnected Bronze Age trade networks failed. Probably, it was all of the above. When multiple civilizations collapsed simultaneously, it suggests a systems failure, where problems in one area cascaded into catastrophe everywhere. The Mycenaeans weren't just conquered or destroyed. They were part of a larger collapse that ended an entire age. Angkor. In Cambodia, from about 800 to 1400 AD, the Khmer Empire built one of the most extraordinary urban centers in the pre-industrial world. Angkor was massive, covering over 1,000 square kilometers. At its peak in the 1100s and 1200s, it may have housed over 1 million people, making it one of the world's largest pre-industrial cities. The Temple of Angkor Wat is the largest religious monument on Earth. Built in the early 1100s, it covers 162 hectares and represents the pinnacle of Khmer architecture. The city had hundreds of temples, massive reservoirs called barrays for water management, and an elaborate system of canals and roads. The Khmer Empire dominated Southeast Asia. They controlled trade routes and commanded vast resources. Angkor was wealthy, powerful, and culturally sophisticated. Then it collapsed. By the mid-1400s, Angkor was largely abandoned. The capital moved to Phnom Penh. The great city in the jungle was left to decay. Thai armies had sacked Angkor in 1431, but that doesn't fully explain the abandonment. Why not rebuild? Recent research using LIDAR technology has revealed the truth. Angkor's sophisticated water management system was both its strength and weakness. The network of canals, reservoirs, and moats allowed the city to thrive in a challenging environment. But it was also fragile. Evidence suggests climate change, particularly severe droughts alternating with massive floods, overwhelmed the water system. Canals silted up, reservoirs failed. The infrastructure that supported 1 million people broke down. When the water management system collapsed, the city became unsustainable. Angkor's collapse wasn't dramatic. It was infrastructural. The city didn't die in fire or conquest. It died because its life support systems failed, and the cost of maintaining them became impossible. Petra. Hidden in the desert of Jordan, the Nabatean city of Petra flourished from about 400 BC to 100 AD. The Nabateans carved an entire city from red sandstone cliffs. The treasury, with its elaborate Greek-style facade, is one of the world's most recognizable ancient monuments. But Petra was more than beautiful architecture. It was the center of a trading empire. The Nabateans controlled trade routes carrying frankincense, myrrh, and spices from Arabia to the Mediterranean. They developed sophisticated water management systems, using channels cut into rock to bring water to the desert city. Petra thrived for centuries. Then, around 400 AD, it was largely abandoned. By the 700s, Petra was known only to local Bedouin tribes. The city was lost to the Western world until Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt rediscovered it in 1812. What happened? The Nabatean kingdom was annexed by Rome in 106 AD, ending political independence. but the city continued for another 300 years. The real decline came when trade routes shifted. As Rome redirected trade through Egypt and by sea, Petra's strategic location became less important. There's also evidence of severe earthquakes in 363 AD and 551 AD that damaged the city's water systems. Without the sophisticated infrastructure that brought water to the desert, Petra couldn't sustain a large population. Petra's decline was economic and environmental. When the trade dried up and the water systems failed, there was no reason to maintain a city in the harsh desert. People left gradually, and the desert reclaimed the stone city. Easter Island, one of the most remote inhabited islands on Earth, Easter Island, Rapa Nui, was settled by Polynesians around 1200 AD. The settlers found a subtropical island covered in palm forests with rich volcanic soil and abundant bird populations. It was paradise. The Rapa Nui people developed a unique culture. Most famously, they carved and erected nearly 900 massive stone statues called moai. Some weigh over 80 tons. They stand up to 30 feet tall. The effort required to carve, transport, and erect these monuments was enormous. At its peak, around 1500 to 1600, the island may have supported 15,000 people. Then the civilization collapsed catastrophically. By the time Europeans arrived in 1722, the population had crashed to about 2,000 to 3,000. Many moai had been toppled. The island was deforested and barren. The society had clearly suffered some kind of collapse. What happened? The traditional narrative, popularized by Jared Diamond in Collapse, is that the islanders overexploited their environment. They cut down all the trees to transport moai and build canoes. Deforestation led to soil erosion, crop failure, and collapse of the bird populations they depended on for food. The result was famine, warfare, and population collapse, an ecological disaster of their own making. But recent research complicates this story. Pollen evidence suggests rats introduced by the Polynesians destroyed the palm forests by eating seeds, preventing regeneration. Climate change may have made the island drier, and the catastrophic population decline happened largely after European contact in the 1700s, when introduced diseases devastated the islanders. The true story is probably a combination: environmental degradation, climate change, social upheaval, and European disease. Easter Island isn't just a story of ecological collapse. It's a story of how multiple disasters can compound until a civilization can't recover. The Olmec. In southern Mexico, from about 1500 to 400 BC, the Olmec civilization emerged as Mesoamerica's first major complex society. They built ceremonial centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta. They created massive stone heads, some weighing up to 50 tons, carved from basalt transported from 50 miles away. The Olmec developed early forms of writing and the Mesoamerican ball game. They established trade networks throughout the region. Their art and iconography influenced all later Mesoamerican civilizations, including the Maya and Aztec. The Olmec are considered the mother culture of Mesoamerica. Then, around 400 BC, their major centers were systematically destroyed. Many monuments were ritually buried or defaced. The civilization declined and was eventually forgotten. Later, Mesoamerican peoples built their own civilizations on Olmec foundations, but seemed to have little memory of their predecessors. Why did the Olmec collapse? The destruction of monuments appears deliberate, suggesting internal revolt or religious transformation rather than foreign invasion. One theory suggests environmental change made their homeland less habitable. The Coatzacoalcos River, which the civilization depended on, may have changed course. Another possibility is political or religious upheaval. The systematic burial of monuments suggests people deliberately rejecting their old ways. Perhaps a new belief system arose that viewed the old monuments as wrong or even evil. We may never know. The Olmec left no decipherable written records explaining what happened. By the time literate civilizations arose in Mesoamerica, the Olmec were already ancient history. The Aksumite Empire. In what's now Ethiopia and Eritrea, from about 100 to 940 AD, the kingdom of Aksum was one of the world's great powers. Aksumite rulers controlled trade routes linking Rome, India, and Arabia. The capital city, Aksum, had massive stone obelisks, some over 100 feet tall. The kingdom minted its own coins. It was one of the first civilizations to officially adopt Christianity, around 330 AD. For centuries, Aksum was mentioned alongside Rome, Persia, and China as one of the world's four great powers. Arab writers described it as rich and powerful. Then it declined and largely disappeared from history. By 1000 AD, Aksum was abandoned as a capital. The kingdom fractured. Power shifted south into the Ethiopian highlands. Aksum became a backwater. Its monuments were forgotten. What happened? The decline appears gradual rather than catastrophic. Climate change may have reduced agricultural productivity. The rise of Islam in the 600s disrupted Red Sea trade routes that Aksum depended on. Persian and Arab traders replaced Aksumite merchants. There's also evidence of environmental degradation. Deforestation around Aksum may have led to soil erosion and declining food production. As trade declined and agriculture suffered, the kingdom lost its economic foundation. Aksum's decline is less mysterious than some civilizations on this list. We can trace the economic and political factors. But it's still remarkable how completely a once great power could fade into obscurity. For centuries, Aksum's towering obelisks stood in forgotten ruins before modern archaeology rediscovered their significance. 10 civilizations, 10 mysteries. The Maya walked away from cities they'd built over centuries. The Indus Valley people gradually abandoned the most advanced urban culture of the Bronze Age. The Anasazi left cliff dwellings that still stand empty. The Minoans disappeared after volcanic eruption and possible conquest. The Mycenaeans collapsed in a Bronze Age catastrophe. Angkor's million people dispersed when their infrastructure failed. Petra was abandoned when trade routes changed. Easter Island suffered ecological collapse. The Olmec deliberately destroyed their own monuments. Aksum faded from great power to backwater. What's the pattern? Most of these collapses weren't sudden catastrophes. They were systems failures. Civilizations are complex. They require functioning agriculture, trade networks, political systems, infrastructure, and environmental resources. When multiple systems fail simultaneously, even great civilizations can't adapt fast enough. Environmental change is a common thread. Drought devastated the Maya and Anasazi. Deforestation contributed to Easter Island and Aksum's decline. Angkor's water systems failed. When climate changes or resources are exhausted, civilizations lose their foundation. But environment alone doesn't explain everything. Political upheaval, warfare, disease, economic disruption all play roles. The Bronze Age collapse shows how interconnected civilizations can fail together when trade networks collapse. The Olmec suggest internal revolution or religious transformation can end civilizations as effectively as external threats, and sometimes civilizations just become obsolete. Petra declined when trade routes changed. Aksum faded when Islam disrupted Red Sea commerce. Even successful civilizations can be rendered irrelevant by larger historical forces. The uncomfortable truth these lost civilizations reveal is that no society is permanent. Every civilization, no matter how advanced or powerful, exists in a delicate balance with its environment, neighbors, and internal cohesion. When that balance breaks, even the greatest monuments become ruins. This is Detective Vera Nash, closing the case files on civilizations that vanished. These lost worlds remind us that our own civilization isn't guaranteed to last. The Maya and Romans probably thought their empires would endure forever. Now we walk through their ruins and wonder what happened. If you want to investigate more ancient mysteries, lost civilizations, and the patterns of collapse that threaten every society, subscribe to this channel. We post daily investigations into the past that illuminate the present. What's your theory? Why do civilizations collapse? Is it always environmental? Or are there deeper patterns? Something in how human societies work that makes them inevitably fragile? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, remember, every civilization thinks it will last forever. Every civilization is eventually proven wrong. The question isn't whether our cities will someday be ruins. The question is what future archaeologists will say about why we fell. Case closed.